Okay, it's 10:30 by the clock on the wall. Today's the 23rd of June, and we're in the St. Croix County Conference Room. My name's Joe Miller. I'm the Vice Chairman of the board today. To get started, does anybody have any reason to believe the meeting was not properly noticed? If not, we'll deem it as such. We'll start off by introducing the staff. And Dave?
Dave Peterson, citizen member, town of Kinnickinnick.
Greg Telejohns, supervisor for District 14 for St. Croix County.
Dave Nickham, town of Baldwin, citizen member.
And Julie Peterson is our recorder for today. Okay, we're going to review the minutes from previous meetings from March 24th and May 26th. And Julie, as I pointed out before, on packet page 3, they're showing that I recused myself from a meeting and I also got included in the voting. So we'll need to make that correction. And if board members, do you see any other additions or corrections in the minutes?
Are we approving both of them at the same time?
Yeah, yeah.
Because I can't. I wasn't here in March.
Okay, all right. Okay, so we'll deem them as approved then. Run through the procedure here real quick. Is anybody that's going to speak, if you haven't signed in yet, please sign in on the Diaz over there, and that way you'll swear that you're going to provide accurate and honest information to the board. First, we'll have the community development present their application, and then obviously the board members will ask questions of them. And then we'll have the applicant come to the podium and provide additional information on their application. And we'll give audience members a chance to speak in favor of the application and also opportunity to speak against it if they so desire. And at that point, if there's no other questions, we'll close the public hearing and we will discuss amongst the board members the merits of the application, and then we'll vote on it. And then we will go on to the next application. And so we're going to start with the Matthew Town of Springfield concrete batch plan. Is that right, Mike?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, Mike, the floor is yours.
Very good. We have a request for a conditional use permit. The applicant, Matthew Construction Company, and the agent listed Truerweiler Construction. And I'll note that this property is at 3232 U.S. Highway 12, Section 36 in the town of Springfield. It's well known historically as the Wilson Quarry, maybe, or Wilson Pit, and operated there sometimes the Milestone Pit more currently. The zoning for this site is R1 residential, and the request is for a CUP to allow a operation of a ready-mix concrete plant. And included with the materials provided are the staff report that I'll be going through here, and also the conditional use permit application that was submitted. I would note that the request, again, is for a conditional use permit to allow operation of a ready-mix concrete plant through the end of next year, December 31st, 2023. As referenced in the application. And I'd note that the county has a definition for asphalt plants in our general zoning, chapter 15, section 15805, that also includes ready-mix concrete plants. And asphalt plants, and of course also the ready-mix concrete plants, are listed as a conditional use that may be allowed upon approval of a conditional use permit by the Board of Adjustment within the R1 residential district which this site is zoned. And the applicant's agents indicated that the Matthews site offers an ideal location for staging of a portable temporary ready-mix concrete plant to be used on the current Interstate 94 construction project. Just a quick look at the site, and you'd have Highway 12 here located to the south with, as you can see, the existing access into the mining site. The project is the project site has a conditional use permit to operate a non-metallic mining facility owned by Matthew Construction and operated by Milestone Materials. This has been in operation for decades, I believe back to the 1930s. Last renewed, that permit was last renewed in 2021, and there have been no complaints or no violations. It's operating in compliance. The site it's currently used for both aggregate and well, it's approved for frac sand, but there's a hiatus in that based on lack of market demand for the frac sand aspect of the site. The request involves about a 4-acre area on one of the parcels that are part of the mining site, and basically there aren't going to be any buildings or structures beyond the mechanical equipment that's used in conjunction with the concrete plant. The plant will be temporary and portable in nature and located adjacent to where the aggregate stockpiling is occurring. This site map indicates where the activity will be associated with this on the site. And very little site work would be necessary. It's an already disturbed area and very contained and pretty isolated as well. The plant will be utilized to mix concrete, and there'll be truck loading for delivery to the adjacent DOT Interstate 94 project. Just a couple details of the concrete plant and conveyor system. I'll jump through some of the project information. I'm sure the board has read this material, and I believe it's pretty straightforward. They're going to use the existing driveway access from Highway 12, and operational periods will include generally daytime operating hours, 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. During weekdays, and intermittent operation during weekends only as the project demands necessitate. They've also asked for the ability to have 24-hour operation, again, only as needed to meet the project demands, sometimes for safety and to facilitate keeping the interstate or interchanges open during daytime hours. DOT will require operations in the evenings. The outdoor storage will consist of piles of aggregate and sand stored on the existing site, and I'll note that cement materials will be stored in portable enclosed bins and handled in such a manner as to minimize any dust exposure. And the activities will include staging, handling, mixing of materials, loading of delivery trucks, and washout of trucks into internally drained ponds. Going on, there aren't any setback issues based on internally where this is located, will be located on the site. In terms of erosion control and stormwater management, because they're participating in DOT construction work, strict environmental and erosion control standards must be adhered to and are regularly monitored by DOT project staff. Now, Trierweiler Construction also hold a current and valid plant-specific Wisconsin DNR general permit for stormwater runoff. The applicants indicated that noise will be less than or equal to the current noise generated by the traffic on the interstate, and additionally, the plant will only be in operation for approximately 10 total days during the 2-year duration of the project. They've indicated dust control procedures that will be implemented during operation of the plant. And lastly, if there's nighttime operation, that lighting would be directed away from any surrounding budding residential uses. There isn't anything real close to the actual part of the project area where this is going to happen anyways. I would just note that we haven't received any comment from Wisconsin DNR or the town. I did last minute receive something, just actually opened it up before I came to the meeting, from the town of Springfield indicating that they're fine with the CUP. They have no objection to it. And we also did hear from DOT indicating they didn't have any comment on this. Just became aware of that as well. In terms of the options for the board, as is customary, we have this slide that indicates your criteria you're considering and your options of approving the request, denying the request, or tabling and postponing the decision to consider information gathered or request additional information. We've included, there's a lengthy group of findings and of fact and conclusions of law, but a lot of this is informational on this proposal. And I won't go through and reiterate some of the site details that we included in findings, but I would note that we have referenced that there aren't any additional buildings, structures beyond the mechanical equipment proposed. We have noted that the concrete plant will be temporary and portable in nature and located adjacent to where the aggregate stockpiling is occurring. We also reference, among other things, calling out the hours again, and the request, including the request to operate on a 24-hour operation basis if required to serve the project needs for DOT. And we reference that activities that are expected to occur related to the concrete plant in item 16 here in the findings. I'd note that also that we called out what I already went over, the assumptions about managing noise and dust, and the reference to how lighting would be handled with nighttime operation. Lastly, on the findings of fact, in terms of evaluating the proposal against our criteria for CUP approval, the plant is listed in the R1 district as a conditional use, and we don't really have specific standards for asphalt or concrete plants. We have some other standards that are applicable in terms of things like parking, lighting, that sort of stuff, which this proposal complies with. And And so we don't see that there's any conflict in terms of the ability to allow the use. In respect to any impacts on the neighborhood or residential development in the general vicinity, the use will, we don't see this as causing a reduction in property values. It's a pretty isolated site, and it's where it's going is in the existing pit area, and the use is just temporary as well through the end of 2023. Going on in terms of whether it would create any nuisance issues, the applicant's submittal really indicates how any of those types of concerns would be limited and very managed. And basically, the plant would not constitute a nuisance due to its isolated location within the Milestone Pit, and that it would be operated in adherence with applicable regulations and permit requirements, and basically be operated for a limited number of days for a limited period of time. We don't believe the use violates the spirit or intent of the chapter. Again, it's a use that can be allowed by conditional use, and siting of the plant on a temporary basis in a non-metallic mining site is consistent with the spirit and intent of our regulations. And lastly, on findings, the proposed use would serve a public interest by providing concrete for an important public infrastructure project. I think that's something that in general would well serve the public. For our staff recommendation on action, based on the findings of fact and conclusions of law, staff recommend approval of the conditional use permit with conditions referenced 1 through 8 in the staff report. I'll notice just a note on the first one that siting and operation of the plant shall conform to the plans and specifications and supporting information provided by the applicant in their application to the county. We recognize as CUP application 2022-009 on file with our department. And we also included a condition that nighttime operation shall only be utilized when mandated in the plans and proposal by the DOT. And just calling out that the expectation of the dust control be basically implemented as proposed in the applicant's submittal. And also on here that we had number 5 that they're required to secure any other local, state, or federal permit licenses and approvals. Standard condition, but I just call it out. They have indicated they have other permits in place needed from DNR or DOT. And our last 3 conditions are kind of standard ones we include with all our CUP actions. Staff can field any questions you may have. There's representatives of the applicant here if you have any questions better answered by them.
Board members, any questions?
We had a complaint a couple of years ago about the runoff of the creek. Has there been any complaints since?
Haven't received any complaint since. We did go through on this one. There was an amendment where the sampling, the water testing was changed because of the reduced to once a year because of the frac sand not being conducted, being on hiatus. So we haven't had any follow-up concerns expressed about the creek.
Okay. Mike, I got a couple. How do we get notified of their 24-hour operations requests?
Well, the way this is structured is if it's required by DOT, they're allowed to do it. If the board feels that the county should get notified, we could certainly have them notify land use administrator, me essentially as a contact person. That would be maybe an adjustment to this. Given the temporary nature of this and the fact that it's associated with the I-94 work, I just set this up so that they're allowed to do it if it's required by the project.
No, I don't see a requirement to have to do anything like that. Like I say, it's going to be a temporary thing. The other question I got is, have the neighbors been contacted? I know there's only one or two in the area, if I remember right, about this proposal.
I think it would have had a mailing of surrounding property owners, as is customary for CUPs, as is required by law.
Okay.
And I didn't receive any comments or feedback. Usually on the actions on the mining site, there's one or two that often ask, well, what's it about? I haven't heard anything on this.
Board members, you got any questions for the applicants? Is there anybody in the audience that wants to comment either for or against this application? And I see no one making any effort to do so. Okay, at this point, we'll close the hearing, and board members will discuss it amongst ourselves. Any thoughts?
And move we approve the conditional use permit as presented by the staff.
I'll second it.
Okay, we got a motion made and seconded. All in favor of approving, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, it's approved unanimously. Thank you, Mike. Before you begin this Haas application, Mike, I've got a disclosure. My wife has a relative that works for the applicant, and he is far enough removed from my family tree that he is not a part of my immediate family.
Very good. Pardon me, I'm just cursoring down to get to the next staff report here. Bear with me just a moment. There we go. Okay. Our next item on the agenda is a conditional use permit request from Haas Sons Properties. Their agent recognized as Haas Sons Incorporated, and we have Jason Haas here with us today. Should any questions arise or should he wish to comment further following the staff presentation. The site for this conditional use permit request is located at 487 Highway 128 in the town of Katy. This would be in Section 10 of the town of Katy. There are three parcels or portions of three existing tax parcels that are involved with this request. We're also processing a certified survey map that is reconfiguring the property. I'll address that in my staff report, but basically the area that this request involves will become recognized as a lot within the new certified survey map when it's finalized. The property in question is zoned I-1 industrial, and the request involves asking for a conditional use permit to allow crushing and recycling of asphalt and concrete and washing of limestone aggregate. And included with the packet materials is the staff report I'm going through and the conditional use permit application that was submitted by Haas Sons Properties. The area involved in the request is approximately 51-acre portion of the Haas property, and it's located about roughly 1,500 feet south of the interchange of Highway 128 and I-94 in the town of Katy again. This is just a site layout of both existing facilities, which include a concrete plant and a couple existing buildings. This property was formerly a cheese production facility, used as a cheese production facility. Also shown on here are roughly the facilities proposed in conjunction with the concrete and asphalt recycling and washing of aggregate. Just a bit of background on this one. Haas Sons Properties acquired the property in 2017. Overall, they have 66 acres in 5 parcels. They began operation of and this was before the town of Katy was part of county zoning, which they came in, they were I think the first town that came into the current chapter 15 of our zoning towards the end of 2019. So they began operation of their concrete plant in 2018, we did do a land use permit at the time because it was in shoreland area, and the county did have shoreland authority in the town of Katy, even though they weren't part of our general zoning at the time. And I noted prior use of the property was as a cheese plant. The Haas Sons Incorporated contacted county staff regarding the approval process to add concrete and asphalt recycling and the aggregate washing on the site. And basically, staff determined that the use could be allowed it was an industrial use, and it could be allowed in either of our industrial districts. The I-1 zoning would subject it to a conditional use process, which I think the town and the county felt would be appropriate in case there was a need to establish any specific conditions related to the activity. Haas Sons Properties were referred to the town of Katy to discuss amendment of the town's comprehensive plan. The property was previously zoned C3 and was really guided for commercial use, and the town in August of 2021 they approved an amendment to their comp plan that basically recognized the site proposed for this as a generalized higher intensity growth area including industrial uses, and And so basically that that opened the door to rezone to the industrial zoning. And I've got a site map here, which the area around the interchange was guided that way. And what they did is they did an amendment to include the site area involved in the Haas operation, or at least this request. Some additional background on this. Again, it was rezoned from C3 to I1. Town of Katy recommended approval of that in March of this year, and County Board of Supervisors approved it on May 3rd of this year. The existing operation for the concrete plant, it was a legal non-conforming use because it was operating prior to the Town of Katy joining county zoning. And it's basically in the I-1 district, we do list concrete plants, or I should say asphalt plants, and also concrete plants as being a permitted use. The conditional use permit request, again, involves about 51 acres, 51.25 acres. I would note that we are just finishing up processing of a certified survey map that's reconfiguring the property to essentially put together a lot that conforms to the area involved in this request. And it will be recognized, well, I'll just pull it up and show it to you. It will be recognized as Lot 2, the area involved in this request, part of the overall 66 acres, which also includes on this CSM what you see as Outlot 1 and Lot 3, which were not rezoned. So the area rezoned to I-1 is what's shown as Lot 2 on this CSM. We included a slide in the staff report. There might be a slight discrepancy. This was provided by the applicant for the rezoning process, and there's an area down here that also ended up being included in the rezoning to I-1, and which is, again, consistent with what this certified survey map shows. We have a site plan included in the staff report provided by the applicant that superimposes the activities that they want to add over an aerial photo of the site, so you can get a sense of how it will lay out. Basically, stockpiling of materials and location for crushing equipment when that's brought in. They've indicated a 2 to 3 week window each year that they're intending to conduct that activity, as well as washing of aggregate that would occur in what was established as a lined pond area as part of the cheese production facility. There have been some modifications to grout pipes and to avoid contamination post after the closing of the cheese production facility. Let me just run through a few site issues on this that I think are relevant. The crushing and recycling of asphalt and concrete and washing of limestone aggregate best fit under heavy industry. Our definition for heavy industry in our zoning ordinance, section 15.805. The existing plant falls under the asphalt plant. It could also be considered a heavy industrial use, and the asphalt plant or concrete plant, which is included, is listed as a permitted use in the I-1 district in our use table. The Wisconsin DNR has issued 2 stormwater permits for the site, and I won't read through the details of this, but I'm just pointing out that those permits are up to date and in place, and that essentially gives us confidence that the applicant's complying with their stormwater management needs. I'll note that the DNR, again, the DNR permits are up to date. The sound dampening berms are included on the 22 site map that they've included, and are labeled and shown wider than the stormwater containment berms. I'll just call that out, note that. Based on the site plan and supporting documents, the applicant has indicated that proposed berms would be a minimum of 10 feet, and the slope of these berms would not exceed a 3-to-1 slope. However, they only indicate these berms will be seeded with native seed. And I'll note staff has recommended, and including in the staff recommendation, which I will get to, that the applicant utilize native seed mix along with properly anchoring mulch. This would ensure the seed is not blown away by the wind and will prevent real erosion and from occurring along the slopes of the berm. In addition, I just call out that the applicant is not proposing new permanent structures, and in conjunction with the new activities to be added, and temporary equipment would be brought in during a 2 to 3 week period each year when these operations will be conducted. An existing, as I noted already, an existing polyline pond that was constructed prior to the cheese production facilities will be utilized for washing of limestone aggregate and in conformance with applicable DNR requirements. And in terms of the hours, proposed hours for these activities, the crushing and washing operations are proposed to operate from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. Monday through Friday, and possibly, but they say not likely, 6 a.m. to 3 p.m. on Saturday. Crushing operations are expected to take 2 weeks per year, and washing operations may take 3 weeks per year. And hauling hours are 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. Monday through Friday, unless there is a special project which requires additional hours of operation. No new site access roads are being proposed, and sufficient parking exists to accommodate staffing associated with the proposed limited duration activities. And no new lighting is being proposed. I would note, just to update the agency review slide, that DOT has indicated no objection. We haven't received any comment from DNR on this, and but we know that they were involved with review of original issues associated with the site and a land use permit the county did for the concrete plant back in 2018. The town hasn't offered any specific comments on the CUP, but they are well aware of this. They amended their comprehensive plan and recommended approval of a change of zone, and we're confident that they're comfortable with what Haas is proposing with this CUP. Our standard slide noting the criteria you use to evaluate this, and also your options for action: approving the request, denying the request, or tabling and postponing the decision, to consider information gathered or request additional information. We have included findings of fact and conclusions of law, and I'm just cursoring through to remind myself how many here we have. A total of 21 items we reference under findings. A lot of this is referencing information about the site, and I won't go through these in detail. A lot of this I've already covered with the information or general overview that I've given. I would note that The items really being addressed in this are the crushing and recycling of asphalt and washing of limestone aggregate, and requiring a conditional use permit in the I-1 district. We do call out that they're current on their stormwater permits, and I did note the additional conditions staff has recommended, referenced in findings here in number 9. It'll be reiterated in the staff recommendations when I get to that. We can field any questions if there are any from the board on these findings. Again, I'm sure you've read them, so I won't reiterate. I've already covered the what the applicant is indicating their intent regarding hours of operation. I will cover our remarks we included in the findings regarding the criteria that you use to evaluate the CUP. First, I'd note that in terms of complying with applicable standards, the crushing and recycling of asphalt and concrete and washing of limestone aggregate are recognized as heavy industrial uses and may be allowed by CUP in the I-1 district. We don't have so much specific standards for these, but would be generally concerned about management of stormwater and nuisance issues such as dust, noise, which the applicant I think has addressed in their proposal. And it is being proposed in an industrial zoned property as well. In terms of any impacts on the general area, residential subdivisions, the proposed activities we believe would not cause a reduction in property values in the affected neighborhood, since they would be sited on a I-1 zoned industrial district, and with appropriate best practices to limit environmental and nuisance related impacts, and would be conducted during a limited window annually, with exceptions based on specific project needs. We've also noted in regard to nuisance issues that the proposed operations we feel would not constitute a nuisance because of that limited operation window, and because of the general nature of the area as well, I would say. The use, again, we feel would not violate the spirit and intent of the chapter. The proposed heavy industrial use is something that can be allowed in the I-1 zone through a CUP process that we're going through. And the applicant, with their proposal and with applicable standards both from the county and from Wisconsin DNR, we feel is consistent with the spirit and intent of our general zoning, Chapter 15. The use not being contrary to public health, safety, or welfare, staff believes conformance with applicable rules, regulations, and permitting requirements, along with the use of specific site improvements and best practices, will ensure that the proposed uses will not be contrary to public health, safety, or general welfare. And lastly, we've identified, we've included a recommendation of approval and identified 6 conditions that we would recommend that the board include. I guess specifically, we're saying that the site improvements and operations should be conducted consistent with the plans and specifications and the supporting information that Haas Sons have provided with their application. We would recognize a CUP application, CUP 2022-024, submitted to the county in May 2nd, and on file in our department. And I'm just calling out, I would call out one correction, which I've already brought to Julie's attention on condition number 2, where we recognize that the conditional use permit would be applied to the area identified as Lot 3. That should read as Lot 2. It was referenced that way early in the staff report and just noticed it as a typo. And lastly, we included as condition number 3 the staff recommendation regarding the treatment of the berms, that as part of establishing vegetative cover on the proposed berms, the applicant shall utilize native seed mix along with properly anchored mulch. And beyond that, I would call out that in condition number 5, that if they plan to exceed what they proposed in this in terms of the duration, beyond, say, 3 weeks of operation with the crushing and washing operations, we're asking that they inform land use administrator for the county, just so that we're aware. What we find sometimes, this is a permanent operation, will be ongoing year to year, and if we're aware of it, if we get any questions or complaints by any nearby property owners, we'd be able to respond and indicate that it's specific and project related. And if there's a need to expand that window in a significant way, it could involve requesting an amendment to the board down the road. And so we've asked for just 48 hours notice on that if the proposed hours are being exceeded, and that could come in the form of an email to me, basically. Keep it pretty simple. At that, staff can answer any questions. Jason Haas is here and would be happy to field any questions if you have it that he could better answer than staff.
Board members? Hey, Mike, will this be a portable crushing crew that comes in periodically and does this, or is the equipment going to, okay, it will be, okay. I just got an affirmative nod from Mr.
Yeah.
Haas, so.
Jason could better explain, but they have other sites, and so they move things around.
Tell me, Mike, when these applications come in for conditional use permit, what is the criteria for the hours of operation?
Well, honestly, we don't really set specific, we don't have specific performance criteria for every kind of use in our zoning. And typically with uses of this nature that can involve noise, dust, maybe heavier traffic, often the desire is to avoid evening hours if possible, and limit weekends, so that if there are any nearby property owners that it would affect the use and enjoyment of their properties. If you're crushing and there's noise, and you're doing it at really early morning hours or nighttime hours, and you're keeping people awake, that can be problematic. If you're doing something that generally the dust control measures are going to control the dust on a site like this, but I've seen other instances where mining sites have residential more proximate to them, and controlling dust at times when people are more likely to be outside on their properties, weekends for example, you're trying to manage.
Well, that makes sense. I understand that. The reason I question it, I guess, is for like the hauling. This property, which I'm very familiar with, sits right on the intersection of heavy truck traffic 24 hours a day. So as far as their hauling operation, it just seemed to me that whether they're hauling or the semis are going to Quick Trip, it's a toss-up, isn't it?
Mr. Haas could comment on the company's operations, but they put those hours forward to us. And I think really the only issue for the county is, do we feel that they should have to inform us if they're going to depart from them and operate outside of that? If the board were to feel that that's not necessary, well, you could adjust that condition. We didn't tell them we're going to limit you to these hours. They proposed, well, this is what we expect our operation to include.
Any questions for the applicant? Okay, is there anyone in the audience that wants to speak one way or the other about this application? All right, if not, then we'll close the hearing and deliberate amongst ourselves. Board members, any thoughts?
I don't have any problem with it. They're operating now, and there's been no complaints, so they are going to add the crushing, and as Mike has already stated, could add extra noise and dust and things, but this is a busy intersection here, and there's a truck repair shop not far away, and I don't see any problem.
Is that a motion to approve, Dave?
I make a motion we approve this conditional use permit that the applicant has asked for.
I'll second it.
Okay, we got a motion and a second to approve this application. Any further discussion? All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, nay? Unanimous in favor. Thank you, Mike. Okay, that concludes our hearings for today. Next order of business is next month's meeting. And according to some paperwork I've got buried somewhere here, it's scheduled for 28th of July.
Yeah. Is there anything on the agenda for it?
We got anything going that day, Mike?
Yeah, 28th of July. I would just add that we will have...
Mike, turn on your microphone, please.
We will have 4 items for consideration by the board, and a CUP and 3 variances, and it should involve a lot of discussion. A couple of them are Riverway variances, and one is an after-the-fact accessory building that it's always hard when it's after the fact, something that was built. And also a very interesting proposal for agritourism-related drive-through petting zoo being proposed that we would consider as an ag and entertainment conditional use. So that should be interesting for the board.
Drive-through petting zoo, okay.
Yeah, it's the same folks, yeah. What's that now?
You think it could end up being a 2-day event?
Well, I hope we don't have to do a 2-day event. We'll think that through a little before the meeting. I don't think so. I think we'll try to do the 4. The issues on the variances are, in some respects, they're straightforward. It's just that whenever we have Riverway, there's always a lot of dialogue. And then also the after-the-fact request, Again, they're just a little harder when, it's harder to show hardship when you've sort of created the need for the variance by building something, so. But the applicant's, pursuing it, and we have to give fair consideration, so I think we can accomplish it in a timely fashion on the 28th.
All right. Any other business, board members? If not, we'll deem the meeting adjourned at 11:25. Thank you all for coming.